So a bit of an update regarding what's going on in Lil Durk's case. And as it stands, it looks like he's absolutely cooked. Now, this all began when Lil Durk was actually arrested near Miami International Airport on a federal charge of murder for hire. Now, this was in relation to the death of Surveyor Robinson, who's the cousin to Quando Rondo, back in 2022. Now, the shots that were fired into the car were meant for Quando Rondo in retaliation for the death of King Von back in 2020. At the time of King Von's death, Lil Durk and King Von had to be separated due to a case that they were currently facing, which is when both King Von and Lil Durk were accused of a drive-by shooting that left a man fatally wounded back in 2019. Now, it gets a little bit dicey here, because after the death of King Von, it kind of looks like Lil Durk used this as an advantage to say that the person who took those shots that day was King Von, which allowed the case in 2022 to be dropped against Lil Durk. Meaning that, simply put, he used the death of his best friend as an advantage to claim that he wasn't the shooter involved in that case. But back in 2020, this case was still currently ongoing and charges that the two were currently facing. So at the time, the two were separated but were both celebrating the release of King Von's debut album. And while out celebrating, King Von bumped into Quando Rondo, who'd just been napping in the back of an SUV. There was no communication between the two. King Von simply launched an attack immediately. And at that time, an individual by the name of Lil Tim, who was a friend of Quando Rondo, took out his pistol and shot King Von. Now, once Lil Tim took the shots at King Von, undercover police in the area actually fired back. One of the shots fired by police managed to wound Lil Tim, meaning that they were able to apprehend at that point the individual that they believe was responsible for the murder of King Von. Now, because of the state that this was in and how this actually played out, Lil Tim was actually acquitted for murder, and it was seen as self-defense, which then somewhat allowed Quando Rondo and the members of his group, as well as Lil Tim, to profit from the death of King Von. Because once Lil Tim was released, all eyes were actually on Lil Tim, whether or not he would actually speak out about this situation. And any song that Lil Tim or Quando Rondo was due to drop was heavily anticipated due to the public wondering whether there would be any lyrics taking shots at OTF or Lil Durk. And poking the bear and adding more salt in the wound, that's exactly what they fucking did. With Lil Tim even going as far as to release a song regarding how he smoked King Von, while he dances around in the music video toting pistols. Then on the platform of X, subliminal kind of indirect messages between Lil Durk's crew and Quando Rondo's crew would then take place. But eventually Quando Rondo would somewhat back down, apologise and publicly state that he wanted no more part in anything that was going on regarding all these issues prior. And that although the incident had taken place, there was nothing that he could really do, seeing as they'd seen it as self-defense, and that the group that they were opposing would have probably have done the same if they were too in that position. But also, the public and fans of Lil Durk, as well as fans of Quando Rondo, didn't really help the situation either, as they were anticipating some kind of get back, and they were anticipating this rather fast. So majority of the time, all Lil Durk heard was, "When are you gonna slide for King Von?" Basically meaning, when on earth are you going to retaliate? But while Lil Durk was dealing with the death of King Von, just 7 months later, Lil Durk would lose his brother to gun violence outside of a club on the 6th of June. And although Lil Durk would go quite quiet regarding these incidences, as well as the public wondering what was actually going to happen as a retaliation, it would seem like the prosecution are alleging that Lil Durk had quite a busy 2022. In 2022, Quando Rondo and his cousin, Surveyor Robinson, were travelling through Los Angeles in a black SUV. As Quando Rondo pulls out at the gas station, 3 individuals on foot unload a barrage of bullets into the SUV that Quando Rondo is driving. Now, Quando Rondo is actually unscathed during this incident, but his cousin, Surveyor Robinson, was fatally shot and pronounced dead at the scene, which was actually caught on camera. Now, Lil Durk wasn't one of the individuals that was on foot that day that fired into the car, but Lil Durk was the individual that ordered the hit of Quando Rondo. And prosecutors allege that a credit card linked to both Lil Durk and OTF was used to purchase flights for the co-conspirators to travel from Chicago to California, which at that time was where they believed that Quando Rondo was located. Prosecutors also say that they found a text message from a telephone number that's associated with Lil Durk, which stated that they don't book no flights under no names to an associate of Lil Durk. In the background of all of this, Thomas Callahan, an FBI special agent, was pretty busy with his investigation regarding Lil Durk. That's because on the 27th of January 2022, 7 months before Savannah Robinson's murder, Stephen Mack was also murdered in Chicago. And this is due to a former alleged gang member that's been working with the FBI for over 5 years. Now, the former gang member that's working with the FBI is currently unknown to the public, but is an individual that was clearly close to Lil Durk, and claimed that Lil Durk was actually offering money for those responsible for the death of his brother. Now, while he's not formally been charged for the murder of Stephen Mack, as we all know that he's currently facing murder for hire charges and is behind bars, when Lil Durk applied for a $3 million bond, Thomas Callahan actually responded. And that's when we got some documentation regarding Stephen Mack's murder. Now, the evidence actually included a message and text exchange between the two suspects roughly around 2 weeks after Mack was murdered. And the messages, which were discovered through a phone search warrant, discuss payment for the killing as well as mentioning Durk and OTF. OTF being the latter acronym that refers to Durk's record label. They're stating that when the user of that phone, the phone in which that was used as evidence, wrote the words "we waiting, he comes up here on the 17th", the user was indicating that he was waiting for Lil Durk to arrive on February the 17th to pay them for having killed Mack. Callahan also provided photo evidence of Lil Durk and Montgomery Wilson to prove the connection between the two. He also believes that lyrics from Lil Durk's 2022 song Aha can be interpreted as a reference to Mack's murder. Now again, the reason that this information was actually released was due to the fact that at that point Lil Durk was seeking bail, and they were basically saying like, look, you're already up for murder for hire charges and we also have this as well. We don't think that you should be allowed back into the public. But then actually something rather interesting came out from a sound engineer by the name of Just Vibes, as his evidence put forward on December the 15th appeared to discredit the prosecution's claim that Lil Durk sought to profit from the death of Robinson by rapping about it. And this was due to Lil Durk's track, which is called Babyface Ray, which the prosecution argued referenced a news clip of Robinson's murder. The prosecution highlighted the line, "Look on the news and see your son, you're screaming no, no," claiming it was inspired by audio of Quando Rondo's screaming after discovering Robinson's body. However though, Just Vibes' affidavit actually stated that he watched Lil Durk write these lyrics on January the 25th, 2022, which is nearly 7 months before Robinson's death. And although it might not have been meant for Quando Rondo at the time, don't forget that just a couple of days later, Stephen Mack was also murdered. So the prosecution's claims that those lyrics were meant for someone could be somewhat correct, except they're just not for that exact person. I mean, those lyrics could have been for Quando Rondo in anticipation, knowing what was about to come, but it also could have been for Stephen Mack as well. But they could have just generalized it as it's for anyone, and it was just simply rap. But Just Vibes was actually able to provide screenshots showing that he'd saved the draft of that song on January the 25th, which obviously contradicts the prosecution's timeline. Although they've somewhat been able to prove a contradiction in the timeline to what the prosecution state, I think lyrics are the least of their concerns. If that 5-year insider that worked for the FBI is wired at any point and has wiretap of them, it's game, set, and match. Although Lil Durk's played the justice system before, it's going to be pretty hard to fight a 5-year informant that has literally had you recorded from day dot. Oh, and about 5 minutes ago, more information regarding Lil Durk was just released. Apparently, while inside of prison, he's now abusing phone calls. You're not allowed a 3-way conversation on the jail recorded calls, yet Lil Durk has somehow been able to manipulate the system in order to be able to do that. But there is a complete rundown as to everything that we somewhat know so far regarding Lil Durk and the case moving forward. So be sure to drop a like and follow for more updates.